Hey guys, welcome to the first installment of Color Connection with Amber. In each episode, we will create projects with the color palette featured in Altenew's monthly inspiration challenge. I enjoy experimenting with color, and my hope is to inspire you to use color combinations in different ways. Noreen from our card design team is hosting the inspiration challenge this month. She chose these beautiful succulents to jumpstart our creativity and pulled a pastel palette from the photo. Each of the colors is a cool tone, so they'll mix well. You would want to avoid a yellow-green when mixing it with your purple, as that could turn brown. This palette is just in time for your spring projects, so let's get started. I'm using Build-A-Flower Cattleya today, and this image is perfect for clean and simple cards because of the large arrangement of the blooms. We'll mix up our layer stamping by jumping around with the color families, using Frayed Leaf from Green Fields, Iceberg from Lapis Lazuli family, and Wisteria from Enchanted Garden. Here you can see how the images layer up with a single color family. I will omit the solid layer to keep the blooms mostly white. For my other card, I'll be using Potted Plants stamp set and the metallic 14 pan watercolor set. And you can see that I've already taken out the colors that I'm going to use. There isn't a color similar to Frayed Leaf, so I'm going to alter the palette slightly by using Aquamarine for the green, Topaz for the blue, and Amethyst for the purple. There's so many great options with the potted plants. I'm going to use the snake plant for a variegated look. So I wanted to watercolor these images, but I needed the outline. And so what I'm going to do is add watercolor directly to the stamp. I have it in my mini Misty here. And this is the aquamarine color. I'm just taking it straight out of the pan. I've rehydrated the pan with just a drop of water. And then I'm just going to hold that on the paper so that the paint has a chance to soak in just a little bit. And then I'll take some of the amethyst paint. I've watered it down in a small palette here, and I'm taking that directly to the paper. And this is just watercolor paper that I have in the Misty. And that didn't look as loose as I wanted it to look, so I'm going to take the aquamarine paint back to the stamp. I'll stamp that over, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the amethyst. I'm going to bring touches of amethyst to the stamp just so that I get a more organic pattern. When I took the paintbrush, and that's a number 4 round brush, when I took the paintbrush directly to the stamp, it didn't look as organic to me. So this adds more of an organic feel, and the purple is adding shadows to those leaves and variation in color so that it looks like a variegated leaf. Here I've inked up only the bottom of the plant, so the rim that goes behind the stamps, I just didn't ink that up. And what I did was just the 2 small edges and brought that directly to the pan, to the plant, so that I didn't have to mask the image. Here I'm taking the amethyst directly to the paper, and this was a wet on dry technique. The paper was dry, the paintbrush is wet, and I'm not using very much water at all. I've rehydrated the watercolors in the pan, but my brush is fairly dry. And so I'm just building up the color here, trying to add a little bit of dimension and round appearance to the pot. So I'm keeping the center more highlighted and then darkening the edges. And I'll just keep building up the color until I'm happy with the look. So I'm going to add, of course, we need to add in our blue so that we have all the colors for our palette. And I'm going to add blue around the rim. I was thinking I would have just a blue rim, but I didn't like how that looked. So we're going to start mixing our colors here. So on the top for the leaves, we have the aquamarine and amethyst. And for the pot, we'll have the topaz and amethyst so that it's a color blend in each area. I didn't let any of the paint dry in between layers, so it moved from a wet on dry technique to a wet on wet technique since there was already pigments and water on the paper. And I just build up to the color until I'm happy. And then moving on to the sentiment, I chose a sentiment from the same stamp set. I've stamped it in Obsidian Black Pigment Ink. Both cards today will be 1 layer and clean and simple. So all I'm going to do is add very fine splatter with the paint that's in my pan to this card, and then I'll also add a shadow. So right here I had intended to put clean clear water there to drop in a shadow, but my paintbrush was dirty, so I just went with it and we made our shadow that way. And I kind of just left it alone because it was fortunately really diluted on my brush. So here you can see the fine splatter that was added, and look how beautifully the metallic paints shimmer. I absolutely love how this turned out. I think the leaves in the pot look so organic, and I really like how that shadow turned out, even though it was a bit of an error on my part. So we'll move on to the second card. So here I have the Build a Flower Cattleya, and this is the outline layer. I'm going to stamp this in black. Now you could definitely do this with a lighter ink. You could do this in like a gray, and that might look nice. For me, I don't use pastel color palettes very often. I'm more of a bold color type of person. So when I saw the colors for this, I was like, oh, okay, we're starting off with a challenge here. It definitely pulls me out of my comfort zone to use more of a pastel palette, which is perfect because I think we tend to be more creative when we're out of our comfort zone. So I'm going to start with this A2 layer. So I'm skipping the solid stamps completely because I want the majority of these blooms to stay white. I want to have a lot of white space on this card, similar to our last card. So this is, we're skipping the solid stamps, we're moving to the first detail layer. Altenew does such a great job with their layer stamps of giving you the full outline of some of the flowers so that it's easy to line up. So what you can see is me lining up the edges with the black lines of the stamps. And I'll do that with the other A2 stamp up top so that you want to just shift your stamp around just a little bit like you see that I'm doing. And you will see those edges just kind of lock into place. And then you know you have it right where you need it to be. I'll get that back into the corner of my Misty, and then I'm going to, so I have my frayed leaf, my iceberg, and my wisteria. I'm going to do the A2 layer with iceberg, and then I'll do my second layer with wisteria. So that will be the color layered over the blue, and then of course the green, we're going to use that for the leaves and the bud. So we'll just get this stamped down. Make sure that you condition your stamps by either rubbing your palm over it. If your stamps look very shiny, then they're not conditioned well enough. You want the top of your stamp to look a little bit cloudy. It's going to take the ink better that way so that it doesn't beat up. So I just either rub my palm over it, or you could also do like just a white eraser. You could rub it lightly over the top. So here I have the A3 layer with wisteria, and I actually stamp it a couple times with the wisteria just to darken it up. I want to make sure that we can see that other color. Now these are going to combine together to create a really beautiful blue violet. For our green, we're going to stamp the bud and these stems. So we've got that there, and then there's another stem on the bottom that also lines up really easily. There are two very small stamps for the centers, and I find with stamps that small, it's much easier to just throw them on a block and stamp them that way versus trying to get them lined up on a Misty. It's just easier that way. So I'm just using a small block, and this block is from Altenew. They have a really versatile block set if you want to check that out. And then I've chosen a sentiment from the set, and I love the font on this sentiment. And I realized that I didn't do the detail layer of the leaves, and I just chose one of the layers, the first detail layer, and I stamped that in blue. So rather than choosing a darker green ink, I chose the blue, which added some detail there. So I have the jet black ink spray. I've tapped off the nozzle back into the container to get the majority of the ink off, and now I'm just tapping it on the project to add some splatter. And here you can see the detail of those two colors blended together and how it creates that beautiful blue violet. I'd love to hear what you think about these clean and simple projects in the comments down below. I'll also have a link to the Altenew Monthly Inspiration Challenge, so be sure to check that out and post your creations. We'd love to see what you're making. Tag Altenew at Altenew LLC and myself at Notable Ink. Subscribe and ring the bell for more inspiration from the Altenew team. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you real soon with more inspiration.